Hello, I'm Paul Muldoon, and I have the great honour of being a trustee of the Griffin Trust. And it's an even greater honour to announce that Don McKay is the winner of the 2024 Lifetime Achievement Award. We're thrilled, Don, that you are the recipient of this prize. Um, how did it all start out for you, this lifetime?
Oh, this lifetime, as I began as a child, I think that's a line from Bill Cosby way back when. Uh, yes, how did poetry begin? I was late coming to it. I think for some people I see nowadays, they're learning it in grade school. They're learning how to do haiku and things like that. But I came upon it, I think, only when I got to university, uh, and and then I had a major surge once I got into bird watching, which was much later than that. And that'd be in the 70s. And I had another major surge when I became interested in geology and all things rock and so on. And
The
and
basics.
pardon me,
The basics.
the basics. That's for me, yes, the basics. What I always return to. Yeah,
Let's go back to those slightly earlier times. You went to university in Canada, of course, but then you found yourself at the University of Wales and working there on Dylan Thomas. Was Dylan Thomas any kind of force, as it were, for you?
I was fascinated by that. The Dylan Thomas idiom and the play of pushing of syntax and sense and so on and so forth. I think I was, in some ways, to tell you the truth, I was more intellectually interested than I was deeply moved by it. Of course, everybody's deeply moved by, especially those the later poems, do not go gentle into that good night, and so on. Um, I think it's probably good that I didn't feel myself under Dylan Thomas's influence because I think that would be a dreadful influence. It's inimitable so,
It's
but it was
fascinating.
fascinating doing a degree over in England as opposed to here, you could read extraordinarily widely, and so it was a great stimulus just getting into. I always had to read everything that Dylan Thomas read, and he read voraciously and indiscriminately. So that was a fabulous experience.
Can we talk for a moment, or may we talk for a moment about influence? It's fascinating to me that really strong poets, poets with particularly distinctive voices, Eliot, for example, and certainly Thomas,
Yeah.
Wallace Stevens, perhaps,
Yes. Yes.
Marianne Moore, are
Yeah.
poets who are very, very dangerous for the rest of us to come close to.
I agree. I agree. And essential to read, but absorb. And then when it comes to your own writing, not to fall into imitation. I think painters do, right? I mean, if you're learning painting, you have to go and imitate the great masters. You sit in the art gallery and try to do the Van Gogh or Rembrandt, so on. I I never I don't think that's appropriate for poets at all. To tell you the truth, I
Well,
agree with you.
there are often some poets, though, whom one necessarily imitates. I mean, in your wide reading at the University of Wales, were there poets who were somehow more instructive, more useful to you, I suppose would be the term?
Oh, yes, yes. At that time, I quote discovered or the Seamus Heaney's poets discovered me. I walked around with um, Death of a Naturalist in my back pocket. I think my copy of Death of a Naturalist still shaped to my backside. And Ted Hughes, that's at the same time, very influential. Meanwhile, back here, Al Purdy, again, a very distinctive voice, you know, uh, more like, say, the Patrick Kavanagh in Ireland, someone that coming out of that folk tradition and also the work tradition. Um, was and again somebody you want to appreciate and not imitate. I think they were all these. Now those people are really important for me, and other poets in Canada like Alden Nolan, extremely important. And for me, a very different poet Margaret Avison. I think Margaret actually won the Griffin Prize sometime. She did, yeah, some time ago. And I met her at when I took a job at Western at the University of Western Ontario, and she was writer in residence. And she was she had a presence that was like being in the presence of an otter or a mink, powerful. Uh, and we'd actually, as an undergraduate, I actually studied her poetry, and I thought, oh, here's a Canadian poet who's just as obscure as T.S. Eliot. This must be really good, boy.
So you mentioned the otter and the mink there, the natural world, of course, pressing in and presenting itself almost as you don't have to go looking for it. It comes to you. Is that what you found in terms of what we might describe as nature poetry?
Yes, yes. It's very interesting, isn't it? I used to be a nature poet, and I'm just doing the same thing, but now I'm an eco poet. It's nice. And of course, I guess my awareness has shifted over time to be more aware of the interrelationships of all the natural world, much more aware and more sort of deeply sort of ontologically impressed by those relationships. Yeah. It's always, I mean, I think my sort of sense of myself as a poet really took off when I became obsessed with birds. And I was one of those people that was obsessed and I was impossible to be with. People say, don't say anything, don't say feather, don't say flight, don't say anything, or you'll set them off. And I think that's just persisted all the way along. And then, as I was saying to you before, another focus became geology when I moved to British Columbia. And I was interested in getting into that landscape without the tourist fringe, as they say, the kind of overwritten tourist presentations of it. And I did a lot of work walking and thinking about a particular fault zone, the Lost Creek Leech River Fault, which is the last piece. See, here I go. I'm getting into geology now, and I can hear my friends say, "Oh my God, I think I'll go. I think I left the kettle on the stove. Let's let him go babbling to himself." So all of those things became quite benign obsessions, and those both persist. And I think that without that, I'm not sure we'd be writing anything at all.
Would you say that the business of writing poetry and now having spent a lifetime writing it and being rewarded for this lifetime's work, I mean, do you think of it as, can you imagine having lived your life in any other way at all? Or is it something that is so built into your core that you could not imagine any other way of having lived?
That's a very interesting question. I'll probably be thinking about it for a week or so after this call is over. I can't imagine it. That a combination of sort of the empirical knowledge of the external world. Always, when I grew up, it was if you're going to be in the arts, you are not in the sciences. And the silos were very powerful. There are people that I never met who were actually teaching at the same university I was, and it turned out to be wonderful people, but they were in the sciences. And that has changed with that whole ecological shift. I'm now out here. My partner has a wonderful project called the Boreal Poetry Garden. She lives out here in the middle of the woods, and she started, and I have now helped contribute to making this network of paths, and we have little events there, which we have various artists coming, and writers and musicians and dancers, and we just stop at different places and have presentations. And the arts and the sciences just go. There is no silo any longer.
No,
the party helps it. We have a garage party afterwards in Marlene's garage. That would make me rethink your question. Now, might I have become an ornithologist, or might I become a geologist if I hadn't sensed this terrible gap? I don't think I have a natural talent. I don't have a natural talent for the mathematics and the scientific stuff, but I certainly have met wonderful people, people who have poetic souls, I would say, who are functioning boreal ecologists of one kind or another.
So they're really involved in the same thing as we are. In fact, I think it's very telling. I'm often reminded of Robert Frost's notion of the poem as being itself a clearing. One of his books was called Clearing.
The
And
clearing, yes.
you mentioned the path there in the arboreal woods, the arboreal paths. The path that might lead to a clearing, the clearing that is some kind of moment of clarification. So
Yeah,
it's that point that the arts and the sciences come together, because it's all about clarification, I'd suggest.
that's very good. Very interesting point. There's also that Transformer poem, prose poem called "The Clearing." You know, and again, that's that is, I think that's one of the sort of like my sort of go-to place for somebody who actually sort of catches epiphany, you know, in that poem. And it's again and again these things are happen. It's just like the wonder of it, and knowing the complexity of it, like recent revelations sort of from Suzanne Simard and others about the mycelium, the fungal networks that connects trees to trees, the wood wide web, they're coming to call it.
Yes.
You know, these are that's not mere science. That's and learning about that does not decrease the astonishment or the wonder of it one whit. In fact, it multiplies it. There's an awful lot of excellent ecological writing going on now, in prose writing. I can't keep up. So that's
Well, we cannot barely keep up with you, Don McKay, but we're thrilled to be able to honor you on this occasion with the Lifetime Achievement Award. And I'm wondering if we might close our conversation with your reading one of your poems, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for being with us today.
And I'm honored, deeply honored by this award. And my poems are all happy. Have this. The poem I'd like to read is called As If. And it's a poem that's both about one of those moments of astonishment that we were just talking about, and also about metaphor, the as if phenomenon. And it happened close to here, not on the Conception Bay coast, but on the Atlantic side of the Avalon Peninsula. When I was out walking, and I thought I saw in a cove, as I was coming along the trail, I thought it looked like the Milky Way, or looked like my idea of the Milky Way, kind of twinkling. I guess a Walt Disney version of the Milky Way. And of course it wasn't, but it was eider ducks, which I hadn't seen in Newfoundland before that. As if. Play it con brio, a muscular I am, a frisbee sizzling, as if into no man's land, an emptiness unfurling fast and fern-like. Last winter, from a cliff along the coast, I saw a Milky Way strewn lavishly across the cove, twinkling in the chop. It was cold, and so some moments before my stiff fingers unburied the binoculars and found it to be eiders. In their black skipper's caps, they scudded the waves, Cole's own creatures, their white chests flashing in the slant sun, until, as at a signal, with a move, part gulp, part slurp, each one after the other dove, like this, as if, as if, as if that surface were the border, suddenly porous, between yes and no, so and not so.
Don McKay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Wonderful to see you again.
Thank you.